All right. Hi, I'm Meggie Conley. I am an individual with PCOS. I am also a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and that kind of my health journey with PCOS led me to that. I'm also a mom. I'm married. Um, I live in Florida, and I'm excited to share my story with PCOS, hoping that it helped other individuals that maybe haven't gotten a diagnosis or are still struggling and maybe give them some tips and ideas. And sometimes just knowing that you're not alone is really, really helpful. My symptoms started when I was really young. I got my period when I was, I think, 11. And then I started developing acne, really, really bad acne around 11 as well. And that went through elementary school, middle school. I was put on birth control really early at like age 12, 13 to help control the acne. And it just continued until through high school. I was on Accutane for 2.5 years. That was traumatic because you had to go get a pregnancy test every month. And I wasn't sexually active at like 15. So that was my early experience with PCOS, mostly the acne and, of course, the excess body hair. That's one of the symptoms that I experienced very early on in life. And that's really hard when you're a teenager and you live in Florida and you want to wear a bikini all the time. Um, so those are the symptoms that I first experienced. And of course, I've actually always had anxiety. I just didn't know that it was related to my PCOS because there is a big correlation between anxiety and depression in PCOS. Research found that 40 to 60% of individuals with PCOS have anxiety or depression. So I had been experiencing anxiety since I was pretty young. So those were my early symptoms. Didn't know that they were related to PCOS. Didn't know I didn't have a regular period because I was put on birth control at a really young age. When I went into college, I gained a bunch of weight, which is pretty, most individuals like gain weight their first year or two. I think it definitely had to do with like me eating out all the time, but also I now know that my PCOS might have made it worse. During college, I gained a bunch of weight. I was able to start on like a health journey with exercising and changing my eating habits, and I did lose some weight. And it was at the end of college that I actually was diagnosed with PCOS. And I didn't know, I only was diagnosed because my two older sisters were diagnosed. And they were like, hey, you should probably get checked out because we have it. Maybe you have it. I don't know. So I went and got diagnosed. I went and got tested, had the pelvic ultrasound. And for those that have had that, that's kind of like, it's traumatic. Like, it's not comfortable. They didn't even have to do the lab tests to know my testosterone was high because I had a lot of signs and symptoms of high testosterone, the excess hair growth, the acne. Um, so I was diagnosed and basically told to stay on birth control. And the OB said, just come back when you want to get pregnant. And that was it. Uh, and the funny story was when I was diagnosed, I was 21 and I had just come back from the movie Juno, which was released. Remember that movie where the girl gets pregnant by accident and I think she gives it up for adoption. But at that point in my life, I was just finishing college. I was with my husband for like almost 4 years. He was my boyfriend at that point. So I was like, if I got pregnant after years of trying to prevent pregnancy, I was like, oh, like if I got pregnant, I'd be okay with it. I was like at a point in my life where I was like, okay. And I come home from that movie and I had the letter from my doctor telling me I had PCOS. And I just started bawling because I was basically told like I couldn't have kids after I had like emotionally accepted that I could. So that's one thing that I think is hard because a lot of individuals are told like you're not gonna be able to get pregnant, and that is not true. There's so many treatment options, and there's so many things that you can do, lifestyle wise, nutrition, medication, supplements that can help improve your chance of conception naturally or even assisted. Um, so throughout my 20s, I had weight fluctuations, kind of depended on like the stress that I had in my life. My symptoms of like acne and excess hair growth and then hair loss started, anxiety, depression. So I guess every time I would go to a doctor, like it wasn't being fully addressed. You'd go to a dermatologist because your hair was falling out and I was told, well, you should be happy that you have this much hair. Or you go to an endocrinologist and you wait, 3 months, you pay out of pocket, and you're told, oh, just do 2 long runs a month. Or you don't have PCOS because you're not obese, like all these different things. So I think the most frustrating part about having PCOS is that our symptoms affect all these different medical disciplines, right? Like dermatology, gynecology, psychology, even your primary care, but no one connects them together. So you don't realize that maybe your gut health issues or your anxiety or depression, all these other symptoms that your extreme fatigue, right? You don't realize that these are all connected to your PCOS. So during my 20s, I feel like I had my symptoms under control for a few years. I did, I want to share this story because it's very common for individuals with PCOS to have a miscarriage. I did get pregnant and I miscarried, and I didn't know I was pregnant until I miscarried. So that was a traumatic experience. Because again, you didn't know that you could get pregnant, and it wasn't a time in my life when I wanted to have kids, but at the same time, knowing that you lost a baby was really hard. So one thing that I want people to understand is that it's definitely possible to get pregnant when you have PCOS. You might have a little bit of difficulty. So that's why it's important to make sure you build that like healthcare team to really support you in all aspects. Let's see, like I want to make some happy things with PCOS. I realized that each decade of my life, my symptoms have changed. So when I was younger, it was more acne, it was more excess hair growth. When I started to get into my 20s, it was weight gain, fatigue. And even after I had my baby, my symptoms have continued to change. So I think it's important to learn how to manage your PCOS and like a holistic approach, because you don't know when certain symptoms will pop up. Like certain years where my fatigue was so bad, like I couldn't get out of bed and go to work, when now it's not. But signs of insulin resistance are creeping in now, that I'm like closer to 40, and I have a history of diabetes. So now that's kind of like my focus. So I guess I wish I could say it always gets better, but you kind of have to be on your toes and constantly working on those lifestyle habits for PCOS.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's really
Right.
helpful. I mean, can you take me to early teens, late teens, acne, body hair? When did the like tiredness, fatigue kick in? Was that earlier, younger?
I would say I think I noticed it more in my late 20s. It was like I went to grad school when I was 25, and I had like so much energy then. It's like amazing. And then like the day I graduated and I became like a real adult, it was like 28 when I started working. Um, the fatigue. Oh my gosh, it was like the work. I always explain it that it felt like when I woke up, I was hit by a bus, like the body aches and the fatigue, like I couldn't get out of bed and move. And that would be after like 9, 10 hours of sleep. It was it was like debilitating. Um, and a lot of individuals with PCOS experience the fatigue, and they just think that there are people say, "Oh, you're lazy," or like. Um, so it's not. It's a common symptom, but not always associated with PCOS. Um, so that was later in my 20s, and I do correlate it with a lot of stress in my life at that time, work stress, and for me personally, a lot of my triggers are related to stress. A lot of my symptoms get worse when I'm stressed out. So,
That makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
I think on your website you mentioned mood swings too. What's that like?
Yes.
When did that start?
Oh my gosh. And those are things that are so common that you're like, oh, I just thought that was normal. Um, I didn't notice that I had them until, well, I know that I realized later in life, like in my 30s, that I had had panic attacks and anxiety for so many years, but it wasn't like ever addressed. And I didn't know that it's like, oh, maybe this is anxiety. Um, and with the mood swings, I didn't realize I had them until I went off birth control to have my daughter. And I finally was experiencing my hormones for the first time since I was like 18. Um, and I would get angry so quickly, and like my mood swings were so extreme, and I was like, oh my God, this is what life is like. Because I had been on birth control for so long, I just never knew what it was truly like. So it was, I really had to like watch myself at work because I would get angry really quickly at people. Yeah, it was something that I had to like recognize and then learn to like anger management techniques to make sure that I would not get really upset with people. Yeah. Yeah, it was a midwife at my OBGYN, and she was fantastic. And she was like, "Well, here's just stay on your birth control, and when you want to get pregnant, just come back and I'll give you medication." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, and that was it. There was no guidance on nutrition or exercise or lifestyle or the side effects or literally nothing. Like it was just like, here's your birth control, come back and I'll give you a pill when you want to get pregnant to ovulate. And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't understand the severity of the condition because wasn't presented in a way that it was a lifelong syndrome. Like it was just like, oh, you might have a problem. Um, I didn't know that it would increase my risk for diabetes or cardiovascular disease or certain types of cancer. I didn't know that the anxiety I was, experiencing were connected, or the excess, I didn't even know the excess body hair or the acne or the weight gain or the fatigue. Like no one explained any of that to me. And this was before social media. So this was like 2004. So you couldn't like, there, like now there's information everywhere, right? Maybe not all good information, but there's information. So back then it was kind of like, what did your doctor tell you? And then you didn't even have like any inkling to like go and investigate, right? It was just kind of, oh, this is it. I think with I think with OBGYNs, a lot of them are they're better at managing more of like the fertility side of PCOS and not the actual like lifestyle or other medical conditions. If you go to I've been to like a reproductive endocrinologist for my PCOS because they're the ones that have like a little bit more training in PCOS. And I wasn't looking to get pregnant. I wanted to make sure that all my hormones were managed and my insulin levels were managed, like all this stuff. And all they were focused on was reproduction. And I'm like, I don't want to get pregnant right now. So I I think that that's why they were. And also I didn't present in the sense like my acne had cleared up. I had a beautiful full head of hair. I was like 21. I was thin. Like I didn't present like a typical PCOS patient. I hate saying that, but I've had doctors tell me, well, you don't have PCOS. Like when I was younger, because I didn't present the way that their textbook said. So I think if I presented in a different way and I had different symptoms that were showing up, then maybe they would have. Um, but that's how I feel, is because I didn't look a certain way that they were like, they didn't bring it up at all. That's what I think.
So did you kind of feel like you were left on your own to manage? And then, yeah, just talk about that journey of like how you figured out how to manage your symptoms.
Yeah. So kind of by accident. When I was in college, I had gained some weight because the PCOS and it progressed on really quickly. It's really easy to gain weight. Um, I started getting interested in actually taking care of myself. So I started exercising and cooking more. I took a nutrition class and then I graduated. And I like fell in love with nutrition. And I started working for a little bit in food service management and I hated it. So I was like, I want to go back to school. Yeah, I hated it. That's a stressful job. But I wanted to go back to school to be a dietitian. So I decided to go back to school. And when I was in one of my medical nutrition therapy classes, they talked about PCOS and we learned about medical nutrition therapy for the PCOS. And I was like, hold up, what? Wait, you're telling me there's something I could do about this? Like, I had no idea. I had never even heard that nutrition and PCOS were related. It was like eye opening to me. So that's when my obsession with like PCOS and nutrition kind of started because I was just like, I was angry at first because no one had told me anything like that I could do something, that I had control, that I could have an impact in my health. Besides what generally your health, but I didn't know that I could improve my PCOS with nutrition. Um, And then I just started like digging into the research, and like fell in love with it then. So I ended up writing my master's thesis on PCOS and perceived risk of developing type 2 diabetes in individuals with PCOS, because a lot of individuals don't realize they're at a 4-time risk of developing diabetes when you have PCOS. So yeah. So that's how I found out, basically by going to school myself because I wanted to be a dietitian, and then I realized, oh my God, I could do something about the condition I have. So yeah. Because one of the kind of underlying drivers of PCOS symptoms is insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is prevalent. The research is like all over. It's like 35 to 80%. So it's a big range, but it's a very strong prevalence of insulin resistance or impaired glucose tolerance, like whatever terminology you want to use. So it increases your risk of developing diabetes. So they say 50% of individuals with PCOS will have diabetes by the age of 40. So yes. So that's why it's so important to bring PCOS to the forefront and realize that this is a public health issue, because the prevalence of PCOS is very high in our population. A lot of it's undiagnosed, and we are at these increased risks for diabetes and also cardiovascular disease and all this other stuff. But no one tells you like about that, like when you're diagnosed when you're 20 and you have insulin resistance, and that's 20 years, by the 40 you will probably have PCOS. And then in the general population, they might start developing insulin resistance in like their 40s, and then by their 60s they might have diabetes. So early diagnosis intervention is, I think, really key.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the clarity in which you explain things. Can you
Yeah.
put simply insulin resistance, or like what's like the average person with no medical knowledge? Can you explain?
Yeah, I love this. I love explaining it. I think it's helpful to understand what's going on in our bodies, because that can help dictate the changes that we make. And so instead of thinking like, oh, I got to eat this to lose weight, no, I got to eat this to improve my insulin sensitivity. So generally, when you eat anything with glucose, like carbohydrates, it's going to get broken down into glucose. So that could be like, starchy veggies, fruit, milk, carbohydrates. You're going to get glucose. It's going to raise your blood sugar. That's what it's supposed to do. Your body will send out insulin. Your pancreas, the beta cells, will send out insulin. And insulin is like, has a key that opens up cell doors and allows the glucose to go inside your cell door to be used as energy, as it's supposed to. Well, with insulin resistance, your keys aren't working. Like your blood sugar goes up, your pancreas sends out insulin, and the cell doors aren't opening. Imagine like a janitor's key ring full of keys, and it's trying like every single key on the key ring to try to open it up. And in the meantime, your body recognizes the high glucose levels, and it's like, ooh, let's send out more insulin and more insulin and more. And eventually the cell door will open and the glucose will go inside the cell. But then you have all this extra insulin floating around in your body. And if you maybe consumed a little extra glucose than what you need, it can easily promote that to fat storage. It's like, oh, let's take all this extra sugar, this glucose, and let's store it as fat for the next time we don't have food to eat, right? Because our bodies are really good at storing fat as like a survival mechanism. Insulin resistance, people that could survive a few days without food lived and then passed down those genes. So you're storing fat really easily, and it also can drop your blood sugar really quickly. And then you have low blood sugar, and then as a result, your body wants carbohydrates. So then you eat, and then you're like, oh, give me the cookies and the bread, and then it shoots your blood sugar back up. So it's like this, it could be this vicious cycle of like high blood sugar, low blood, like up and down. So that's what makes it really difficult to lose weight when you have PCOS, is when you have that high insulin level floating around. So that's how I explain insulin resistance.
Thank you. That was really clear and really helpful. So, I mean, yeah, take me through like what you found that's helped. Like what's the diet that you follow or try to or anything like that? Yeah, like take me to that place.
So I think it's important to remember that it's a full person approach. So nutrition is really important. But I know I'll have clients that eat perfectly, or not perfectly, but eat really, really well, but they don't sleep and they don't do stress management. They're not moving, all of that. And even all of those, you still might need medications or supplements. And I think that's important to understand. There's nothing wrong with taking supplements or medications to control your condition. So I always like to tell individuals that, because there could be a lot of guilt on the internet around using like a medication to help you control this medical condition you have. Um, so for me personally, what I found is a really high fiber diet is really beneficial for me. So a lot of fruits, veggies, whole grains, nuts, seeds, like a master, like a grain salad, like that's my favorite thing. Um, I eat consistently throughout the day, um, because when my blood sugar gets too low, I have crazy carbohydrate cravings. So, and making sure my meals and especially my snacks have enough protein to really keep me full and satisfied. Um, I love using the plate method. So if you Google that, like that's a good guidance of balancing. And I don't restrict the foods that I love. So I still eat cookies. I still bake and make a cake. It's learning to incorporate those baked goods with your meals, or with the protein and fat and the fiber from your meal to help with the blood sugar control. So I would say like making sure you have a lot of fiber and protein in your diet is really beneficial. Movement, exercise is huge. People don't realize how beneficial that can be. Think of your muscles as a sponge for glucose. So when you work them, they suck up the glucose, so it lowers your blood sugar. So that's one thing that I found to be effective. And for me, sleep and stress management are huge. So my PCOS is my adrenal glands secrete a precursor to testosterone in response to stress. So then my high testosterone goes high that way. So I've realized that if I am very stressed, my symptoms get really bad. So I think that's, and then I take some supplements based off of like my blood work and what my personal needs are. But yeah, those are kind of like the sleep, prioritize sleep. It's all hard to do, but you have to make that dedication to yourself. And I always get like 8.5, 9 hours at least. I'm a sleeper. Um, when I had the baby, it was like it was horrible because I'm a sleeper. But like when she goes to bed, I go to bed, and then I just leave the dishes for the morning because they don't matter to me. Like there's certain things in your life that you need to me, sleep is really important, so I prioritize that over like laundry and things like that. Um, I When I decided to get pregnant, I came off birth control. I knew it would take some time. That's when I realized I'm like, wow, look at all like these are a lot of symptoms that suck basically. I took like a year to kind of get myself in the best, healthiest spot. So I did lose a little bit of weight, which can help with conception. So I think I lost like 5% of my body weight. But I did it focusing on health instead of like weight, if that makes sense. I was like, I want to get to the healthiest I can. I want to make sure I'm having daily movement. I want to increase my fruits and vegetables. I want to reduce my stress. So I think that really helped me get pregnant. I conceived naturally. I didn't have any complications throughout my pregnancy. I was lucky I didn't develop gestational diabetes, which were increased risk for. Easy delivery. So I'm very grateful. I had a very except for the heartburn, but other than that, I had a great pregnancy. So I contributed to everything I kind of set myself up with, and I had a lot of knowledge going into it as a dietitian. I think I kept exercising and moved a lot during pregnancy, which I think really benefited me, especially with the delivery and staying like free from pain, and also just helping regulate blood sugars. So I didn't have to take anything. I didn't take metformin or anything like that. Yeah, so I was fortunate. I think I recovered pretty. I think I've recovered pretty well. It was the sleep. I think the biggest thing was like the sleep, because for me, remember, sleep and stress are really a driver of my symptoms. So the lack of sleep made everything worse. With the period, I was breastfeeding for a really long time, and breastfeeding also delays the return of your period. So it's kind of like, well, what's going on? After probably I don't really remember, maybe 9 months, 10 months, I think I got my period back. I started implementing Ovastitol supplement too. So I think that helped as well. but yeah, I think the recovery was pretty good. I didn't have any issues. It's more of learning to manage your PCOS as a mom. Because, like I said, it's like you have to learn to manage your PCOS at different stages of your life. And everything I did before, I couldn't do anymore. Like I used to cook these elaborate meals every night. Now I have 15 minutes maybe to make something. Like I used to work out for an hour if I wanted to, or I could do a yoga class. You can't do that anymore. So I think learning to adjust and like realizing what is actually like what like what's possible to do. Like I can maybe get a 10-minute, 15-minute walk in. I can cook dinner. So prioritizing like what's important to you. That's I think the hardest part after having a baby and managing the condition.
Oh, you mentioned supplements. What
Yeah.
are the supplements that you take?
I take inositol, so Myo and D-chiroinositol. I take a specific brand I like, Ovostatol. Um, it's a pseudo B vitamin, and it's been shown to be just as effective as metformin in individuals with PCOS. So I really like that one. Vitamin D, because my vitamin D levels were low. Fish oil. I take magnesium at night. Um, I've tried berberine in the past, so that's been beneficial. Um, yeah, and I just take a multivitamin because again, I'm not perfect every day, so I like to just make sure that I'm getting enough in there. And then magnesium can help with relaxation at night, and individuals with PCOS have been shown to have low magnesium levels, so it helps kind of like calm me down and help me sleep at night. And fish oil, anti-inflammatory, so it's good for both like brain health and also reducing inflammation will help improve insulin sensitivity. So I take that as well.
Did you ever take metformin?
Yes, I'm actually taking it now. Because as I've gone like towards the end of my 30s, I've had some more signs of insulin resistance. So I'm trying to like that's like my new thing, right? It's like my new symptom I have to. I'm like, what's going on? Like a couple years after having a baby, things are changing. I'm gaining a little bit of weight. I've noticed other signs of insulin resistance. So I talked to my doctor, and because my father had a diabetes and I have PCOS, I think it's a good thing right now for me to take. So that's what I'm currently on to see how it goes. I'm tolerating it like other individuals. Not a lot of individuals tolerate it. So yeah, so hopefully it works. It's pretty safe medication. Some individuals don't like it, and that's totally fine. But for me, I wanted to try it out and see if I see an improvement. I really want to prevent that diabetes at a young age. So,
Interesting. Okay.
mm,
So I guess maybe to close out, we can go through like just your words of wisdom for people experiencing PCOS symptoms or are diagnosed. Yeah, just like what advice would you give, and yeah, whatever feels natural there. Go ahead.
okay. All right. So some words of advice and wisdom I would give is don't discount all the symptoms that you're experiencing and go to as many physicians as possible like, that you need to get them addressed. But do let each doctor know that you're experiencing all these other symptoms. Don't just go to the dermatologist and say you have excess hair growth. Let them know about your carbohydrate cravings or your weight gain or your mood swings and all that stuff because they need to understand how to connect the conditions together. I think it's important to build a healthcare team and know that your primary care, your gynecologist are going to be treating one thing. You're going to need a psychologist to treat your other thing. You're going to need a dermatologist. You might need an endocrinologist. You're going to need a dietitian. You might need a physical therapist or an exercise physiologist. So unfortunately, you're going to need a healthcare team that's going to help address your PCOS symptoms. And it's important to understand that lifestyle changes, exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress management, those are all really the first line defense for PCOS. So there's no medication to treat PCOS if we're just kind of treating symptoms. So that's why we have to treat that root cause in our own bodies. So we need that full person approach. I always like to tell people that because I think that I hear so many times individuals go to the doctor and then they're like, oh, they didn't give me any options. It's because there's really, unfortunately, there's not a lot out there. I hope that's not a downer, but that's just the reality of where we're at. So there's a lot that you can do, and then you can work with your providers to add in the medications or supplements that you might need.